Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webcast on IBM Security Best Practices. Before we begin, I'd like to review some quick housekeeping items. Today's webcast audio is streamed through your computer speakers. If you need technical assistance with the web interface or audio, please reach out to us using the chat window. The presentation is scheduled to last approximately 50 minutes and will be followed by a question and answer session. You can submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the chat window, and we will answer as many as possible at the end. This webcast is being recorded. You will receive an email after the webcast with a link to the recording slides. We encourage you to share them with your colleagues who aren't able to make it today. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's event, Jeff Euling. Jeff is currently a product management director at SyncSort, working directly with the SyncSort security product suite. Jeff has over 30 years of experience working in security technology for the IBM and predecessor systems. Jeff previously worked on the IBM OS development group, specifically as lead architect of the security development team in Rochester, Minnesota. His previous responsibilities at IBM included architecture, design, and development of IBM security. He has also served as a council member of the IBM security technical community. Jeff's primary interests lie in the area of system integrity and now, given the current business environment, cryptography and compliance. So, with the introduction out of the way, Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody. Again, my name is Jeff Euling from SyncSort, and my primary job at SyncSort is the product management director over all of the security capabilities that we have in SyncSort. We're going to talk about best practices today, and we're going to cover a number of different topical areas from some initial slides talking about kind of the state of security in the industry. And we'll get into a lot of the IBM capabilities and finish up with cryptography and network security. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is kind of the state of security and where I see many customers sitting today in today's environment. From a security perspective, we'll talk a lot about layering of security to provide the best protection, but certainly the first area that needs to be defended whenever you're dealing with security is in your network. Okay, so this is a slide that I just want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the industry from a hacker perspective or an intruder perspective. And one of the things that we talked real briefly about is that the different types of folks that are out there on the internet looking and probing throughout the internet, looking for different types of holes into your network. Certainly, there's a large percentage of the hackers that are out there are what I call hackers with a hobby, that are folks just out there playing. Using some of the tools that are generally available from the hacker community, trying to see what types of holes they can find, what systems they can probe, and so on, typically without an intent to do damage. The other two categories of intruders or hackers become much more dangerous. Certainly, if you look at the internet and read about security, you'll see a lot of information related to different types of hacks that have occurred over the years. Lots of companies get their name in print in a bad way. We've seen a lot of them recently. Many times, the issues can be traced back to one of your employees in your company. And we call them the rogue employee that has a criminal intent to work with somebody, either alone or with somebody, in order to access data and be able to sell it or use it to their advantage, right? So we're going to talk about that in more detail as we go through the presentation. The other set of intruders or hackers that are out there are those with criminal intent. They are looking to get your data, get your financial information, and use it for many, many purposes, right? Sell it, steal it, steal technology, etc. Right? So there's a lot of activity happening out in out in the wild in the internet. All right, so what's happening, right? So if you look at your network, if you have publicly facing servers, devices on the network, and you start looking at the network activity that occurs on your network or attempts to be penetrated, you will see a lot of network flow coming into your network or attempting to come into your network. And so there's some statistics out there that I'll just kind of give you one. So if you are going to attach a brand new server to the internet and trace the activity that's being directed to this new server, you will see over 2,000 attempts to penetrate that server in the very first day you connect it. And so that'll give you a little bit of an idea on kind of what is happening and the volume of folks out there that are looking to potentially do some damage to your network infrastructure, right? So 2,000 times a day. And so from a security assessment standpoint, certainly looking at your networks, very, very important, okay? Along those same lines, if you look at some of the statistics that are published, we have over 14,500 unique security vulnerabilities reported each year, 40 a day. This number continues to grow year after year, and so there's certainly a huge risk there as well if you're not staying current on security. Okay, so what should be looked at, right? So from a security assessment standpoint, the recommendation is to make sure that you have a competent person or set of people that are able to assess your infrastructure. Network security is certainly a very, very important place to start, but definitely doesn't stop there, right? You have to look at your networks, all of your client devices, your laptops, desktops, mobile devices, and so on. Certainly your servers, where, especially with IBM I, is where many companies store their corporate data. So you certainly need to be well aware of the security aspects that you have configured for your servers. And then get a little bit deeper, what applications are you running on that server that contains your sensitive data, and are they being assessed from a penetration standpoint. All right, so in the IBM I space, we have a wide range of different size customers, right? The little small customers up to some of the largest customers, biggest customers that IBM has run their business on IBM I. And certainly the security skills that are available in the industry, the competence skills for IBM I mean, if you have those in your company, you're very, very fortunate, because most do not. So what do you need to do, right? You need to go get some help. There's a lot of resources out there. Certainly if you're fortunate enough to have folks in your company that have some deep security skills, they can certainly do at least part of the job. There's a team from IBM called X-Force. It's a big part of IBM, and what they do is they are network experts. And if you're looking to get some help analyzing your network, certainly that group is a very, very good place to go and get some help. Also in the industry, IBM I industry, there are certainly a lot of security consultants out there. Certainly we would love for you to take a look at SyncSort and talk to us about coming in and doing an assessment for you if you do not have the skills. Okay, just one slide. It's kind of a common sense slide. We're just going to talk about physical security. And what I mean with physical security is really, do you have your infrastructure secured correctly from the ability for somebody to walk up to a device and do something to it, right? So typically what we see is, the IBM I servers and the networking equipment typically are going to be in a very controlled space, behind a cipher lock or a badge reader access required to be able to get to those type of devices. And concerns there are somebody being able to walk up to your firewall and disconnect it and be able to bypass all of the rules that you have put into place. Certainly, if you have access to a server, the front panel, I mean, you have a lot of potential issues there with somebody being able to damage your production environment, right? Power off your servers, change the cabling, power, and so on. But a lot of times that we don't think about where the data ends up. And if you think about physical devices, printers, fax machines, and so on, you want to think about that from the data perspective, right? I mean, we do a lot of work to protect the data while it sits on a server, but if we're printing that data or either faxing information or receiving faxes that could have customer information, personal information potentially, and those devices are out in a public area, that's your data that potentially is sitting there waiting for somebody that shouldn't have access to it to pick it up and take it away. Mobile devices, that's a presentation by itself on all of the potential issues with mobile. If you think about just a real simple example where we're using our phones for both work and for personal use, as employees come and go from your company, there's potentially personal information on the phone, but certainly there could also be corporate information on the phone as well. And what do you do in those type of situations, right? You need to think through the security considerations for that. As an employee either leaves the company, loses their phone, those type of things, what do you do? There's a lot of capabilities for mobile today that allow you to do secure wipe, which is basically erase the phone, erase parts of the phone, depending on whether you've got things segmented correctly for personal information versus the business side of the use of the phone. And so you want to take a look at that and think about it. If you have any questions on that, you can certainly contact me at SyncSort, and I can walk you through some things. Okay, let's talk about what's happening now from a vulnerability standpoint and the reasons you need to stay current on your technology. When I worked at IBM, I certainly preached this a lot from the IBM standpoint, and now working for SyncSort, I feel just as strongly about this, right? Because I have a fairly good idea of what's going on in the industry related to the vulnerability space. And staying current on technology is really, really important. And the next few slides will talk through a bunch of reasons why. But basically, it's the requirement to stay current on fixes becomes a much bigger problem these days compared to what it was some number of years ago. A lot of it has to do with open source. Some of the technology I have listed here, Java, OpenSSL, SSH, web servers, and so on, they have a whole different set of rules than what we're used to in the IBMI community as far as how long they support different types of open source packages or products. So we'll talk more about that, but it really goes a long way beyond that even with the IBMI releases now, there's a lot of issues trying to keep the older releases current from a fix standpoint. That has been going on for a while now. So if you're still sitting back on 6.1 or if you're even sitting on 7.1, you're going to start to see a smaller number of fixes being produced for those releases. Of course, 6.1 is out of support, as is 7.1. But there's a lot of customers that still are using those on extended support contracts and so on. And the issues come into play with a lot of the open source technology that even if IBM wanted to produce a fix, a lot of cases they can't for that technology. Same with hardware, right? When you look at your firewall devices, your intrusion detection prevention systems, that typically is a hardware appliance. As technology changes, you can kind of think of this like a car, right? If you're using a firewall or a intrusion detection system that's 10 years old, You're not going to have all the new gadgets and capabilities that you would if you had a brand new car. Same thing with this technology, right? So staying current, that's certainly a very, very important part of security. All right, so what's happening in the vulnerability space, right? So a lot of vulnerabilities have been reported over the last 10 years compared to the previous 50 years before that. A lot of it has to do with the access to the source code and the number of researchers that are out there, right? So many computer companies are using more and more open source technology, as are a lot of the vendor community that develops products for different platforms. This is not just an IBM statement; it's everywhere. And as you start to pick up the open source packages and start including them in your products, and certainly the IBM OS has done that a lot. If you think about all of the open source that's now available, when you talk about Java, SSL, OpenSSL, Ruby, Python, a lot of the new development tools that, if you're paying attention, you've heard about. All of that is open source, and the source code is readily available. So a researcher who's interested in this space, a lot of times they are consultants trying to find the next vulnerability and use that as part of their advertising to be able to get additional work. They can get the source code and start looking at it, try to find problems where, a number of years ago in the IBM space, it was, you had to do it, through test, right? You got the system and started plugging away at it, trying to find things. And so that's a big part of why we're starting to see, or have been seeing, such an explosion in the number of vulnerabilities out there. On IBM here's a list of where many of the vulnerabilities are showing up. Java is a really good example. So Java, when IBM puts out a quarterly package for Java, quarterly update, typically if you look at the details and you can get the list of vulnerabilities that are being fixed every quarter, it ranges anywhere from 20 vulnerabilities up to 50 or more in a quarter for Java. Some of them are very low severity, but some are not. Same with OpenSSL SSH. That's being patched and updated every quarter by IBM. Plus a lot of the other areas. The IBM OS is on this slide, but considering the amount and volume of code that's in IBM OS, it's been relatively stable. But certainly there are occasionally a security problem reported there. All right, so it's not just the OS either. Okay, and so as if your job is IT administration, dealing with your servers and your environment, for power systems, here's a list of technology areas that need to stay current on the fixes. And a lot of the reason for this, and just give you a little bit of background, so when an open source package that typically vendors, IBM or whoever picks up, that code from the open source community, typically when that happens, you can expect that same fix to be needed to be added to lots of different technology areas. OpenSSL, we'll use that as an example, right? Because that's used a lot of places, or OpenSSH, that package. That if you think about your power systems environment, right? I mean, a lot of us on this call are IBM folks, but you have typically have in many environments a BIOS partition. You may have an AIX partition or a Linux partition, or just separate devices running those OSs, HMC and firmware, plus the vendor products. Oftentimes, all of these areas end up with the same open source package eventually ported to that platform, to support what they're doing, in the BIOS partition, for example. The same with your devices. That if you look at SAN or tape libraries, printers, they all have operating systems in them, typically built on top of a Linux technology. and you can pretty much be guaranteed that if you see a fix for IBM I OS for OpenSSL SSH, that fix is going to need to be applied to all of this technology in your enterprise if you want to really stay current. And so it's a huge job for the IT administration team, but it's really a problem out there today. And this is not just an IBM or IBM I statement either. It's everywhere. All right, so for IBM I, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with the IBM I Security PTF group and the Hyper group. Certainly want to stay current on those. But there's a lot of technology on IBM I that cannot be updated through the PTF groups, right? And Java is a good example where you need to specifically download and update Java. Certainly IBM I Access, any of the code that sits on the client, whether it's from IBM or from a vendor, web and application servers and so on, those fixes do not end up in the PTF groups for security or Hyper. You need to separately load those. If you have not already subscribed to what's called My Notifications from IBM, I would recommend you take a look at that. If you need some help with that registration, you can contact the IBM Support Center and they can give you the instructions. And basically what the recommendation there is that anytime a fix comes out of IBM for any technology that you subscribe to, right? So you can go subscribe to IBM I, release 7.3 if that's where you're sitting, or 7.2. And anytime a security bulletin is created by IBM and published, you'll get an email that basically says, here are the fixes available for this issue. You get them quite often from IBM. I'll talk a little bit about viruses and ransomware. So the traditional virus that you see, show up for like a Windows or Linux client device, those are not directly executable on IBM I. Ransomware is a different story in that ransomware certainly has impacted some number of IBM I customers over the years. And ransomware is really a virus that is launched from a client device, usually a Windows or Linux device. And what it does is it will start encrypting your files in whatever file system that the ransomware code can access. And so typically you're going to go get things on your laptop or desktop or mobile device encrypted. But if you have open file access into IBM I through NetServer or pick your favorite way to get in, you have the ability, or the ransomware virus has the ability to reach into IBM I and start encrypting data files in the IFS as well. The recommendation there is certainly, and this is nothing new, on your client devices, you need to have a very strong, up-to-date virus scan engine, and you make sure that the client devices are being scanned, so you pick up the fact that, hey, I've got a ransomware virus, and stop it before you end up with lots of data encrypted. And of course, the back end of ransomware is they're holding you hostage for money that they claim that they'll never give you the decryption capabilities unless you pay them to get that. Right? So that's what they're after, is your money. On IBM I, there's a couple of things you can do. A lot of times, this is difficult to do because of the way applications are running, but with NetServer or Samba, certainly you can do a few things listed here to try to limit access to the file system on IBM I from the client devices. If possible, you can take a look at this and leverage that support. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the IBM I server now. And certainly all of the security support that's built into the IBM I OS starts with the Q security system value. Talk about the higher security levels, and we'll talk a little bit about the issues at the lower security levels as well. Right, so security level 40 and 50 both support some system integrity capabilities that really are the basis for protecting the data objects and the executable objects, really all of the objects sitting on IBM I. Right, so the data objects that we're all familiar with are typically the DB2, tables or files sitting in the library on IBM I. Also the IFS, where we have many files that contain data sitting in this directory structure. Without security level 40 or 50, those objects are really quite easily accessed by a program in a way that the IBM OS is really never intending you to access them. I mean, you have some direct access capabilities to go get data. That when you run it at the higher security levels, you have additional protection for your IBM I objects through these three capabilities I have listed here, which we won't go into a deep discussion on them. But basically, the system prevents direct access, by an application program. And what that really means is that when you're running an application on IBM I mean, typically the interface to the objects are either CL commands or APIs that the application programmer would use to access the file, for example, right? So an API on IBM I for DB2 is an API called Open, and there are APIs for read a record, write a record, update a record, delete a record from that DB2 file. Those are all APIs. When you're running at the lower security levels, there are some risks that an application program can use an interface that will not need to use the APIs. And what ends up happening there is that a lot of the security checks that are made when you open a file, right? Does this user have access? Or a lot of the audit record generation is controlled by the API or the CL command itself. And so if you can bypass those APIs or commands and go directly to an object, you'd have a backdoor to it, right? No, not all of the security checks or not all of the audit would occur. Right, so we talked a little bit about this already, but running at the higher security level is really, really important, because at the lower security levels, this built-in integrity functionality that's there is not going to be running at all. Okay, so here's a real high-level picture of an object on IBM I. You could think of this as a database file or a file in the IFS or even a program or a data area. And all of the objects are built out of very similar structures from a system perspective, a low-level system perspective. And the reason I put this chart up is really just to talk a little bit about the storage protection capabilities that are built into IBM I. And so one of the very fortunate things we all have of being in the IBM I space is that your data, if you're running at the high security levels, is very, very well protected by the OS and the microcode. The object sections here are really just to kind of outline the need to really be able to protect the objects from access. If you look at the object header, the top part of the object here, it's protected with a capability that only the very low-level microcode, licensed internal code, has access to it. That's true throughout the system, regardless of what security level you're on now. But years and years ago, and earlier versions of the Power hardware, this area was not so well protected at the lower security levels. But we're in really good shape now. So somebody can't go in and change the owner of the object to the public authority by accessing the object directly. It's protected very well. The middle area is the area that's used by the operating system to store lots of information about the object. A good example here would be, for a job description, you'd see all of the parameters that typically or the parameter values anyway, that you'd see if you prompted for the create job description command, for example. This is where the OS stores that information in this part of the object we call the associated space. So you can think of it as a scratch pad. And the OS code, understands the structure of the data that's sitting there, based on the object type. This area is very, very accessible on security level 30 or below. And so somebody can go in and easily change attributes of your objects if they have have a little bit of skill, programming skill, and are able to do it. The bottom part of the object is really what we call the encapsulated data segment. And this is really important for DB2 files, start file objects, database ones, not necessarily the printer files and DBM files and so on, but the files that actually contain the data, right? So DB2 or a stream file in the IFS. This area is very, very well protected as well. This is where your data lives. So if you're running security level 40 or 50, you're in really, really good shape here. If you're running the lower security level, not so good. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the service tools now. This is SST, DST. These tools are there for several different uses, right? Originally, back in the early releases of AS400, they were really there for IBM problem determination reasons. There's some very, very dangerous tools out there that if somebody has access to SST, you can do a lot of things, okay? There is a CL command, display SST user, that's relatively new. It's within the last 3-4 releases now that you can use to take a look at all the user IDs that are registered in SST, because it's a different user registry, and also see all of the privileges that those users have, right? So I want you to take a look at those. The real main point of this slide is that the tools that are out there are very, very dangerous from a security perspective. There are ability to trace lots of communication lines, see data flowing over the network. If it's not encrypted, user IDs and passwords can flow. There are tools in there to change any object on the system with no additional authority checks beyond having the user ID and password to enter into SST and the privilege to use the tool to do that. It's called display alter dump. Very, very dangerous, right? So you want to keep users out of there if you care about the security aspects, right? Only privileged user that needs to be in there should be there. All right, we'll talk a little bit about a couple of system values now that are interesting. So there's a capability on IBM to quite easily take a program, that has a set of instructions in the program. It's depending on what, how the programmer has written the program. When it's compiled, you get an instruction stream that gets created as part of the program object. Altering that instruction stream can be very, very dangerous, right? It can cause a lot of issues on the system potentially. You could modify the program through a patch to do some, less than normal type of activities. You can change a program to run in system state, which is the equivalent of running as an operating system program. All right, so you have 3 system values that are used to control the restore time of programs. We're going to talk real briefly about the first and the last one. So QAllow object restore, you can take a look at the values there, and what that's really intended to do is to keep, when you're in your production environment, to keep programs that could potentially cause issues on the system. Things like programs that adopt authority, and keep those off your production machine. The forced conversion restore system value in the middle is used to automatically recreate the entire instruction stream of the program if you're set to value 6 or 7. And what this does basically is to say, okay, if somebody is able to get into SST on a test partition, let's say, and patch a program and now take it to your production environment and restore it. If you have this system value set correctly, it will recreate the instruction stream of the program and remove that patch that was added. And so typically the recommendation is really that if you're in the production environment, take a look at these system values, set them to secure value when you're in production mode. If you need to lower the values or change the system values or change them, during your maintenance window, when you restore things, you can do that, but at least you will understand what's coming onto your system in those different environments. The bottom system value here, QVerify object restore, that is very low use today, and part of the reason for that is that very, very few vendors probably zero that I'm aware of, ever digitally sign their programs. And so this system value is really there to control, which types of programs, only allow the ones that are digitally signed onto the system. Unfortunately, that technology is really not taken off in the IBMI space. Certainly, you want to control who has access to the save and restore interfaces on IBMI. The restore interfaces, a lot of times, you think about those, you don't want programs that have more capabilities being loaded and so on. The save commands can be just as dangerous, right? If somebody's able to save your data file that contains your sensitive data, your data potentially just went off the box, right? Save to a save file, FTP it off. And of course, I talked about SST as well, but there's some commands also shipped as part of the operating system, the dump and trace commands. You want to make sure that those are all set to public exclude. They come that way from IBM, but they can be changed to open them up a little bit. But same type of issues there, right, where you can trace different data flowing, dump objects, and so on, see the data. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about audit now. And there's a number of system values you can read about that control auditing on the system. Again, another separate presentation just for audit. Chapter 9 of the Security Reference PDF and a couple of appendices. Take a look at that. There's a lot of information there. What we're going to talk about for best practices is really from a couple of perspectives. Obviously, you want to have auditing running on your system, right? Because it's the one area that we see, the history of what's happened on the system, right? I mean, beyond the audit journal, there's very, very little logging that happens, right? I mean, we see, some things in job logs, QSysOp or message queue, QHIST, etc. But the real details end up in the audit journal, right? So get it turned on. And really the recommendation there is to get the, figure out what the right level of auditing is for your company and get it turned on and save the audit receivers, as long as you can. The reason for that, if you do become the unfortunate company to have a data breach, if you have the audit journal data, you have a reasonable chance to figure out what happened. You have some chance to figure out what happened anyway. If you do not have audit turned on in the audit data, you'll have very, very few chances to figure out whether the data breach affected IBMI or not. So that's just kind of a general statement about auditing. This slide talks about your data files. And so what we're talking about here is your DB2 or IFS files that contain your sensitive data, that data you really care about in your environment, in your company. The recommendation here is obviously you want to audit the object itself using change object audit, turn it on. But you also want to journal that file. And the reason for that is that for a DB2 file or for a stream file in the IFS, what the security auditing is going to do is it's going to give you an audit trail that basically says, user Jeff opened this file for update or opened this stream file, but you will not see an audit record for every little piece of information that changed in that file. The journal support does that, right? So it's a combination of both security auditing and data auditing. So you can take a look at that for sure for your sensitive data objects. This is just an overview slide. You can kind of look at that. It's basically the steps to turn on auditing, turn on object auditing, and user auditing. All right, so the audit journal itself contains a lot of information, potentially, depending on the level of audit you turn on in the system values. And one of the things that IBM has never really invested in is the ability to take that data and mine it out of the audit journal. SyncSort has very, very good products to do that for you. So if you're interested in some help looking at the audit journal data, please contact us. We have products that will help you. System values for passwords, very, very important as well. The longer the password, the better. Case-sensitive passwords. There's a system value that's been around since V5R1 called QPassword level that allows you to use passwords that are longer than 10 characters and that are case-sensitive, right? So you can have upper and lowercase characters, etc. The passwords, as they sit on IBMI, are very, very well protected. But what you want to do from a best practices perspective is really think about your saved media as well, right? So your save security data. Passwords are, when you back up, the users, the passwords are backed up on tape as well. And that's where there can be an exposure from an attack on the passwords. As they sit on media, they're encrypted. But there certainly are lots of techniques in the industry to be able to access those. Take a look at worksysval *sec as well. There's a lot of system values out there. You want to take a look at those and do a little bit of research on the settings. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about resource security now, and this is really the part of the presentation where we're focused on the data objects on IBMI. So DB2s, your stream files, where we keep the sensitive data. And really what you want to take a look at is, from a resource security standpoint, you want to layer security, right? So, IBMI provides really, really good integrity and object level controls, right? So you can define, which users have access to the objects and so on. But one of the things you really want to think about is that when you have your IBMI server up and running, your production environment, the first thing you want to do is keep unauthorized users out of the system, right? So locking the doors and windows into the system. IBMI does not have very good support or deep support to be able to keep people out. I mean, it's really user ID and password, right? And if somebody is able to either discover the password through a trace or use, a lot of the hackers out there will use, emails to try to gain passwords from a user through a scrupulous email asking for information. If they get your password, you are really, really exposed, right? And so the vendor community, including SyncSort, of course, has a very, very strong product that you can use to try to lock down the doors and windows in a much more secure fashion. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, please contact us or let us know you're interested and we'll contact you. But basically, you can use the network security products to add additional rules onto the doors and windows coming into IBMI. And there are a lot of them, right? 25 plus servers that sit on IBMI that allow network access into the system. And the product that we have at SyncSort is able to lock those doors and windows down with another layer of security. Also, multi-factor authentication. We have capabilities in SyncSort for this as well, where that's basically, in addition to a password, you need another factor of authentication to be able to gain access to the server. We have a strong product for that, plus a lot of monitoring and reporting capabilities. All right, so here's a slide that kind of talks a little bit about the approach that you should think about from a security perspective, right? So we've talked a little bit about network and deploy, the network security product already. We're going to get into the object level security and then talk about encryption, audit, and monitoring as we go. All right, so IBM iOS provides a great base for security infrastructure, very strong integrity. SyncSort has products that can help you with all of the other layers, right? Network security, authorization, to your sensitive data files, monitoring, encryption, and so on. All right, so what we're talking about here from a resource security standpoint is really, are you locking down your object, right? Do you have public authority set correctly, ownership, list of users set up? Certainly we want to restrict the number of powerful users on the system. If a user has all of the privileges, right, all object special authorities, security administrator special authority, they have full access to the box. SyncSort has a product called Elevated Authority Manager that minimizes the need for having all these users with all the power all the time. The Elevated Authority Manager allows you to gain that additional authority you need temporarily, and then does a good job of logging the use while in the product, right, while you have the privilege access. Certainly you want to control your users and audit them as well. So if you have powerful users, take a look at the change user audit command and make sure that if you're taking advantage of the support that comes from IBM to add additional auditing for those powerful users. Okay, so this is kind of a summary slide. Obviously, running at the high security level is really necessary. For your data objects, you certainly want to have the public authority set to exclude and only authorize the users that should have access to the data files, and then add the additional layers of security. Okay, so we're going to skip row and column level access control today, and we're going to skip authority collection today as well. And I will definitely get a presentation for both of those coming up at some point. I want to talk a little bit about encryption. Okay, so encryption capabilities, adds that additional layer of security where you have data that's very, very sensitive, right? Credit card numbers, personal information. Securing that data, really, there's two factors here. Right, so we've got encryption algorithms that are very, very much public, right? There's nothing security related about them at all, other than the fact that you really want to choose a very strong algorithm if you're getting into encryption. AES is kind of the state-of-the-art algorithm today for what's called symmetric encryption, the ability to encrypt a piece of data and then decrypt it to get back to clear text. The encryption keys are really what's important, okay? And the thing I want to point out here is that when you have an application that wants to encrypt some data, right, you need these two pieces of information or two pieces of technology to actually take the credit card number, we'll use credit card number as an example, encrypt the credit card number, and then be able to decrypt it. The master key is really the most important of all these keys, right, because it protects all of the other data encryption keys. And the master key, the point here is that key is always going to be in clear text where it's stored. And so from a strong cryptographic standpoint, right, when you're in this development project, you really need a strong capability to protect your master keys. And going forward, right, we have a lot of really good support in SyncSort for this as well. IBMI has a strong key management support as well. The cool thing about the SyncSort support is, we have partnered with Townsend Security to provide the off-partition key management, right? So you can take your encryption keys right off your server, which adds another layer of security to your data. Also, we have the FIPS certified encryption support. This is basically a government evaluation of the algorithms, right, which provides some value. Master key support in IBM, it's really, really, really strong support as well. There's the ability to define the master keys. These are the clear text keys and store them very securely on IBMI. Those master keys are then used to encrypt and protect all of the encryption keys that you're using by different applications on your server, right? So let's say you have two applications that need to encrypt some sensitive data. Each of those applications can use a different encryption key stored in a key store file, and the key store file itself is protected by the master key, right? So all of the keys in the key store file are encrypted by the master key. So it provides that layer of protection. Again, the problem with most cryptography support is that where do you store that master key? And the IBMI support is very strong because it stores it in a control block that only the microcode has access to, where the SyncSort product has the ability to store that key off the box. Lots of encryption algorithms supported inside IBMI to take care of your your issues. All right, so DB2 field procedures. This is a capability that was added in the 7.1 release. This is really, really nice support to be able to take a DB2 file that has data you want to protect and add a capability called DB2 field procedures to be able to automatically encrypt the data without having to get in and actually change the application. It's really, really interesting support that was added in 7.1 by IBM. So the way that this support works is that you could add a user-written or vendor-written program to and associate that program with a DB2 column or a field in your database file. And as the records of that rows of that database file are read or written, the DB2 field procedure program ends up getting control and is able to either encrypt or decrypt, depending on the direction you're going, the data. And all of the internal structural aspects of that database file's field are handled by the database engine within the operating system, right? So any link changes that are required or data type changes at all is taken care of by the IBM code. The trick with this is that you need to be a pretty competent programmer to be able to create this DB2 field procedure, right? It involves adding the encryption algorithms to a program and so on. But the big problem here is, okay, what do you do with your encryption keys, right? It's a very, very difficult problem. And, so even when working at IBM, I always recommended looking at the vendor community for this solution. And we have a very, very strong one within SyncSort to take a look at. I'm going to skip tokenization and anonymization, data at rest today. We talked real briefly about networking now, right? So network security is a vital aspect of IBM security or any security within your network infrastructure. And so while most of us do a pretty good job with firewalls to be able to control access to our networks, and I suspect some number of the folks on the call within your company use intrusion detection and prevention systems as well. If you don't, you want to take a look at these, right? Because there's a lot of capability in the industry today with the hardware devices that do this to be able to really help you keep intruders out of your network. If you're using older technology, you really want to stay current on this. Okay. So what do? They look for lots of patterns. Basically, the hacker attacks they can understand and lock down. From a IBM I perspective, right? Again, this is the lock the IBM I doors and windows. Very, very important. So I just wanted to reiterate that point here. It's really the way that if an intruder gets into your network, you can have a fairly good chance of keeping them off IBM I if you layer that network security, right? Protect your passwords and the additional locks on the doors and windows through the network security product that's available. Talk real briefly about very, very high use capability that's in the industry today, right? When you're going across a network with data, the best practice obviously is to make sure that that's a secure connection from your client device to your server. And the way that this is done is with a technology called TLS, is the kind of the gold standard today. For years and years, we kind of lumped all of these technologies and just called them SSL. But SSL has been broken for many, many years. TLS, the Transport Layer Security, is the follow-on to SSL, and that's the gold standard, right? So a lot of the regulations, requirements out there today require it, TLS 1.2. TLS 1.1 and 1.2 are in existence on IBM I since 7.1. 6.1 did not have this support, right? So if you're on the early releases, you definitely want to move up because this is a very dangerous area to be on. Right, so TLS 1.2. All right, we're going to go through just one more slide. I'm going to skip this one. Skip this one. Okay. All right, so we're going to just kind of wrap this up, and we'll have a couple minutes for questions. So within the support that I presented today, and I did miss a number of slides, and I apologize for that. But really, the point of these slides is really to get you thinking about all of the different areas that you need to look at. And I'll just re-emphasize the security assessment bullet part of the presentation we started with. But take a look at all of the additional capabilities here. I will make sure that my email address gets out to you guys as well. And if you have questions on the slides we didn't cover, I'd be more than happy to answer those. You can email me, and I'll try to get back to you in a reasonable amount of time. All right. So Becky, do we have any questions? I know we only have a couple minutes. Let's see. All right.
Yeah, Jeff, we had we had a question about whether we have solutions for scrambling or masking data in order to send it to a QA environment and protect it from access there.
Yeah. So a couple of the slides that I did skip, and I apologize again for that, is we have a couple of capabilities within SyncSort for very unique capabilities that do not exist on IBM I. Right, so we have a tokenization solution that I'll explain real quickly, and then and also another solution called anonymization. And tokenization is a capability that was created to help. One of the main uses of it is to help customers that have to deal with credit card numbers in their environment to be able to lessen the risks involved there, right? So obviously there's a huge financial risk as a company if you're dealing with credit card numbers of your customers or consumers. And so tokenization, what it allows you to do is basically take an application that deals with credit card numbers and use what's called a token as a replacement set of data for the credit card number, right? So the credit card number is stored off into a token vault, kind of off the server. And as the application runs, tokenization will be used to replace the credit card number within the application. When it comes time to actually, charge the credit card or debit the credit card, depending on the case, then that token is used to reestablish a link to the credit card number kind of off the server, and make that charge or credit back to the card. Anonymization is a little bit different than that. So we have a product in SyncSort that will allow you to do this as well. That what it does, and there's a couple of charts in the presentation if you want to look at those. What it does is it will allow you to take data, personal information, and basically transform it to a kind of a fake set of data, if you will. Right. So, for example, you can use the anonymization support to take personal information like, customer names, and what it will do is it will replace that actual information with a fake name. Right. So you could take Jeff and change it to George. And the reason you want to do that is that a lot of the regulations that are out there today require you to protect this personal information. And if you are needing to take your data, that contains the personal information, and send it off your server for any number of reasons, right? Maybe sending the data to a support center that, to look at a problem, or you want to take some data and turn it into test data so you can take it to your test environment to run, your applications that you've been updating. The anonymization support does a great job of hiding that personal information or turning real personal information into bogus information. So if somebody were able to take that, the data after it being anonymized, and it would be useless from a standpoint of getting real data about your customers. And certainly the the capabilities that we have in SyncSort, for this type of capability, we have available today. All right. Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I thank you guys all for joining, and you guys all have a good day.